I think I should apologize to you for the way I treated you in our last conversation. What I said, Sherry sighed, hiding her slight disappointment at not receiving a concentrated answer. But she soon pushed those thoughts aside. All that? You don't have to apologize for anything, Ghost. In fact, you were in the right much of what you said. The world needs those who are strong enough and do what needs to be done, no matter what. You were right for your impact. People need to be unconventional, kind hero like you, she said, crossing her arms, and Ghost snorted as she looked away. Don't call me that. You're wrong. This world doesn't need a hero. It needs professional, he said. And Sherry felt her body tremble and looked at the man had gave her. I'm no hero. I don't fit in. People like you are the real heroes. Cops, firefighters, doctors, soldiers. You do things that I could never do. And as you said, I don't feel enough to really save a person. I don't fit in with this. The girl licked her lips and lowered her gaze, remembering her own words. Silence lingered in the room for a few moments. After all this, she began, after Wesker and Umbrella corrupted politicians and everything else, what are you gonna do? She asked, and Ghost looked up, still staring at the late afternoon sky. The plan was to stay in the shadows, monitor the world and make sure everyone who tried everything was stopped, killed and dumped in a grave, scattering their corpses as a form of warning everyone who tried the same thing. However, the answer he wanted to give was different. I don't know, he finally answered, but I do know that I'm going to finish your knife training draw, he said, picking up his blade again at great speed and taking a few steps back. Joan? Claire called out the woman's name as she entered the medical tent. A woman in hospital clothes and a mask stood up from the chair next to the bed of one of the patients. Ah, Claire! These are the reports, I presume, the woman said, removing her gloves and walking towards Claire, who nodded. Yes, some medical supplies will arrive in the morning. Patient 47 will have to be transferred, Claire explained, handing the reports to the woman. Understood, thank you, Claire, the woman thanked her, and Claire left the tent shortly afterwards. With a sigh, she fixed her ponytail, walked out through the camp towards the exit. It was already evening, and although she wasn't hungry, it would be good if she went back to the hotel and had a shower. Perhaps she could go out with Sherry afterwards, to relieve all that tension. As she walked, she felt her cell phone vibrate and picked it up, slowing her steps as she saw Sherry's messages. Sherry, Claire, I'm at the hotel now. Chris will be here later to check on us, just so you know. Claire, okay, I just arrived at the campsite. I'll be at the hotel soon. Sherry, great. I don't want to hear him telling us to answer his messages faster than on my own. Not to mention that he's pissed off because his house was hit by one of the missiles. Sherry, you're going to suffer with me. She smiled. Claire, you know what? I think you're alone in this. Sherry, nuh-uh, no chance. Sherry, get your ass over here. You've got till 10. Otherwise, I'll give you your number to Piers. Claire grimaced. Sherry, did you know he asked me to back at the BSAA? Right before everything happened. Sherry, and he's already sent me the messages asking for it. Claire sighed and running her hand through her hair. Really? Even after I say no? Claire, don't you dare. Sherry, come on then. A little insensitive? I'll buy you pizza. How about that? Claire, the woman raised her head as she saw Parker approaching from further behind with some papers in hand. Hey Parker, leaving now? She asked, a little snorting in disgust. Leaving? I'll probably sleep here. Seriously, sometimes your brother is a pain in the ass, he said, a little grimace, and Claire laughed softly. Don't tell him I said that. No problem. I'll keep my mouth shut, she said. Good, Parker said, nodding at her. If I may, I have to find a tent for myself. Apparently the one that is already mine is already occupied. Really? Jill stole your spot? She joked, and Parker snorted. No, I just can't tell if it's better or worse. It was Ghost, he said, and Claire arched an eyebrow slightly in surprise. He's here? He's been here for almost a day. He's in private tent and 09, and I can see if I could stay in 7. I don't know, maybe I could share with someone, he said with a sigh. Anyway, Chris let me know that he'll probably be stopping by your hotel later. In that case, I'll see you. Yeah, Sherry just texted me. Thanks, Parker, she said. Parker nodded before turning and starting to walk away. "A good night to you, Claire," he said, and she nodded and looked at him. As the man walked away, she sighed slightly and shook her own hand. After the conversation with the agent, she hadn't had many opportunities to talk with him. And well, she had plenty of time to read the files on the USB. In a few moments, she had stared walking further into the camp. She was only going to meet the agent to return the USB. She didn't know exactly how to feel. It was rather obvious that other people didn't have access to such information. She would say that even Chris don't know all about the agent's exploits, so on one hand, she felt almost flattered by the coincidence. But on the other hand, she felt a little confused. Why hasn't she given her so much information like that? It was just because of anything. It was important detailed information about successfully completed missions, and there were a lot of them. So many missions that she had heard about that she had no idea of the real proportion. It was hard to believe that he was human. If anything, he was more like a machine. In a few moments, she found herself approaching the tent Parker had mentioned, and the 9 marker on the bottom of the right corner. Was that a good idea? Well, it was too late. She was already there, not to mention that she had to return the files. Stopping in front of the quarters and closed entrance to the tent, she sighed once more. "Ghost?" she called out, waited for an answer that didn't come. Hesitantly, she opened the tent's curtains and slowly stepped inside. Like all tents nearby, this one had a spacious interior. In the right-hand corner of where the bed was on the floor, in the center of the table would be a few chairs around it, a few sheets into the left-hand corner, and the table with a lamp illuminating that looked like a laptop. Next to the bed was a backpack. No sign of him, though. "Ah, Redfield, spying on my quarters?" She felt her skin crawl as she heard his voice just behind her, and the woman returned, facing the agent standing just above the entrance to the tent. "Should I be worried?" "Probably not. I mean, no, you shouldn't," she said, walking him straight calmly towards the table. "I assume you already took a look at the file I gave you," he said, picking up his laptop and placing it on the table in the center of the tent. Yes, that's why I came," she said, approaching the short strides and placing the USB on the table, right next to where he sat. "So?" he asked, looking deep into her eyes, which felt so exposed to his gaze. How could someone have such strong effect? "So I guess you were right. This isn't for me. What I can't do is what you do, and you do it perfectly," she replied, and for a brief moment, somehow, he seemed satisfied with the answer. "Good then. As I said, let the people like me deal with people like them," he said, and he shook his head, searching for the best words as he overturned his laptop. "I've seen all the missions. I've already have every detail. What you do, I've never seen anyone do it. The things you're capable of. I think I have to thank you," she said, and the agent stared at her, waiting for her to continue. "You know, for saying that, for helping me open my eyes. You gave me hope that, although it won't exactly end all evils in the world, bioterrorism will one day." He shook his head. "It won't lead to definite place, but it's impossible. But we'll send a message to prevent any from trying to do the same. And that's something," he said, and he looked at him with curious expression. He was so mysterious, but was so comfortable at the same time. I don't understand how you do it," she began. "I don't understand how you fight easily. What you do for every day, as if it were easy. You see so much chaos and tragedy, and yet you remained unaffected." She swallowed some saliva, shaking her head as she looked away. That conversation was much for him, as it was for her. "You're just a man, and yet you fight like against bioweapons, terrorists, super soldiers. Hell, you go up against practically the whole world with your chest held high. It's like you have no fear. I could never do that." She looked at him in the eyes again. "I'm not like you. I'd have nightmares every night." "When you know something, really know it, it stops giving you nightmares," he said, his firm voice penetrating Claire's mind. She had heard that voice before. "When you know how to fight something, it stops looking so threatening." She swallowed some saliva, digesting those words. They sounded so true, yet so far out of her reach. "You shouldn't be afraid of them, Redfield. Neither biological weapons, nor of you who produced them. Your fears will slow you down. When there's no enemy within, enemies with on the outside, can you do no harm? What does that tell you? He asked, taking her by surprise. He was already pretty unknown, and it sounded like so distant at the times. They were so close to others. He was so cold at times that the others he spoke like a sage, coldness that was rather welcome than uncomfortable, being nothing more than a cool breeze. Why are you telling me this? You don't have to. You don't have to know me, and you let every right to choose the words to strike me, she asked, feeling so close to a complete stranger, but at the same time, someone she always known. It was so confusing. Ghost, for his part, looked thoughtful for a few moments. Because you're so innocent, he replied for a few moments, and as I mentioned before, you're just another victim in all this shit. His response characterized him very well. It was very much like his style. But for some reason, Claire didn't fully believe him. She felt that there was something more, but unlike the other times, her instincts had warned of something hidden. This time, she didn't sense any malice. You're nicer than I thought, she said, trying to relieve the tension. To her surprise, her eyes in the man in front of her showed a certain level of amusement. Worrying about the futile things, like broken pen, she said, and the woman arched an eyebrow in silent question. It's pointless. The woman blinked a few times, her eyes widening slightly as she digested the words. That was a joke, she asked, sheepishly, and he just shrugged. A bit of humor. It may help relieve the tension on stressful missions. She blinked a few times, a bemused smile, a signal springing to her lips. It made a certain agent's heart skip a beat. It was the first time he'd seen her smile after so long, and her smile was just as beautiful as he remembered. So you're so skilled and lethal mysterious agent make jokes? She asked again. She shrugged completely, ignoring the agent's voice in his mind. Nothing wrong with a good sense of humor, she arched an eyebrow. Really? Okay, tell me another one, he grunted softly, thoughtfully. What did the ocean say to the beach? She shook her head. Nothing, it just waved. They stared at each other for a few moments, and the woman's smile widening by the second, until she shook her head. Jesus, that was awful, she laughed lightly, and Ghost found himself lost for a moment. That was wrong. Very wrong. But to hell with it. I disagree, he simply replied. Ghost, that was terrible. It was not. Of course it was. I imagine living with your brother be some kind of consequence. You have lost your sense of humor. She laughed a little. You call that sense of humor? Yes, indeed. She leaned slightly and propped her side up to the table with one hand, still looking at him with a smile on her lips. And he certainly wasn't as bad as she expected, of course, but she was aware that he was one of the most deadly men on the battlefield she ever met. But as a person, he didn't seem so bad. You're different from what I've imagined. That's a surprise. He looked at her with a certain curiosity. Well, you can't blame me. Your story, your voice, your build, your mask. Anyone would be hesitant about you. Someone so lethal that no one has ever seen his face. He looked at the thoughtful for a few moments. Maybe, but I don't wear a mask just to hide my face. I wear it to show what I've become. People fear, and only because of my abilities, but also because they don't know me, hence my nickname, he said, and Claire looked at him with a different countenance, and her smile leaving her face as she gave away no serious expression. Strange as it may seem, you look so familiar, she said, and just like her, Ghost's countenance also changed, adopting more serious expression behind the mask. It's the feeling. You're so easy to talk to. I feel like I know you. With a serious expression, her eyes shining with intensity, Ghost leaned back in his chair. Maybe you do, he said, the voice in his mind falling on deaf ears.